have anything in my teeth. I don't make videos like this very often. So I want to make a video about the recent podcast with Joe Rogan and Sam Altman. If you know me, I'm not the biggest fan of Joe Rogan usually. I don't really listen to his podcast. But I listened to this one because, it's good to know what the Silicon Valley tech bros are thinking and how they're planning to shape our lives with technologies that will replace jobs or cause the entire industry of Hollywood to go on strike, those little things. So, yeah, it's good to keep on top of it. And I think that this podcast it felt very much like a discussion between two like-minded people, and there was very little skepticism coming from Joe Rogan about a lot of the premises that Sam Altman's thoughts are based on. So I think it would be good to have some perspective, and I have machine learning expertise. I worked at Apple, worked on Siri doing machine learning. That's kind of my deal, and I have a lot of thoughts. I always have thoughts. So that is the plan. So my two main points in response are this. One, there was an overall attitude, technology can solve all of our problems. Give it enough time, we might have a lot of problems now, but just give it some time, technology will solve everything. That is one point that both of them agreed on implicitly throughout the discussion, and there was no one there to challenge it. Two, the notion of we can create something that's objective. Our algorithms might be biased now, and they might have problems now, but ultimately we can make something that is objective and completely rational and has no problems that humans have. And these issues of subjectivity that humans have are just an artifact of us being humans, and we can actually make something with our technology that's much better than that. Those are the two notions that I very much disagree with and am pushing back on. Okay, so let's start. I think I wanted to start, it's about 3 minutes in.
And I think it's the most exciting story of all time. I think it's how we get to this world of abundance. And although we do have these things to navigate, and there will be these downsides, if you think about what it means for the world, the cost dramatically falls, the abundance goes way up. I think we'll do the same thing with energy. And I think those are the two sort of key inputs to everything else we want. So if we can have abundant and cheap energy and intelligence, that will transform people's lives largely for the better. And I think it's going to, in the same way that if we could go back now 500 years and look at someone's life, we'd say, well, there's some great things, but they didn't have this, they didn't have that. Can you believe they didn't have modern medicine? That's what people are going to look back at us like, but in 50 years.
It's this, Sam Altman starts talking about abundant, cheap energy. And so I think that a lot of this technology can solve all of our issues is based on this idea that we can have abundant, cheap energy that's basically comes with no strings attached. And it's an idea that's perpetuated by people who have been growing up in an infinite growth system like the one that we have, and a system that always expects to return more value to investors than the year before because the economy grows and the economy never stops growing. And if the economy does stop growing for half of a second, the whole world goes into a recession and people starve because the free flow of capital has made it so that we all rely on each other throughout the globe, global interdependence. And if that stops moving, then the shipments of food stop delivering to your doorstep. That's a long-winded way of saying the idea of infinite growth is obviously flawed. Energy is a finite resource. It doesn't come out of thin air. It comes out of mass, but there's finite mass. So yes, if we got fusion technology to work, maybe we could have abundant, cheap energy. But realistically speaking, let's follow that thread, right? You still have massive problems with distributing your energy, which costs huge amounts of raw materials to build grids and batteries and infrastructure that can hold all of this energy and distribute it to people. It's not like every single person is going to have a fusion reactor on their little pinky finger, right? That's not how it works. So when you have to build this massive infrastructure for these infinite needs for more and more and more energy, you have to take more from the earth. You have to take more resources, lithium, copper, nickel, rare earth metals, cobalt. You have to take these things from the earth. So you make a massive pit, you fill it with a bunch of acid, and then you wait for the lithium to come out of that toxic waste, right? And then you leave it there. So you pillage the earth in your quest for infinite, abundant, cheap energy, whatever. And you, by the time you have something like looking like what you want, I mean, first of all, you're not gonna get real. You're not talking about abundant, cheap energy for third world countries. You're talking about abundant, cheap energy for America, so America can keep growing for the century maybe before we destroy the world completely, right? You're not going to build your grid in Africa before you build it in the United States. That's not your plan, okay? Get real. So when you premise your whole argument on, when you start it from looking for this false utopia of abundant, cheap energy that can never exist, because it relies on exploiting more and infinitely. That energy can never come from nothing. Even if you have fusion, you still have to exploit and pillage to maintain the infrastructure to keep growing like you're envisioning. When you premise your ideas about technology on that, it's fundamentally a lie. So that's number one. Number two, I thought this was kind of, I don't know, naive. 6 minutes in, he says something like, I think that we will do something like universal basic income.
I think there's things that we're going to do that are good to do but not sufficient. So I think at some point we will do something like a UBI or some other kind of like very long-term unemployment insurance something. But we'll have some way of giving people, like redistributing money in society as a cushion for people as people figure out the new jobs. But there's just so much stuff we can all do if we do get to this world of abundant intelligence where you can sort of just think of a new idea and it gets created. But again, that doesn't, to the point we started with, that doesn't provide like great solace to people who are losing their jobs today. So saying there's going to be this great indefinite stuff in the future, people are like, what are we doing today? So, you know, I think we will, as a society, do things like UBI and other ways of redistribution, but I don't think that gets at the core of what people want. I think what people want is like agency, self-determination, the ability to play a role in architecting the future along with the rest of society, the ability to express themselves and create something meaningful to them.
Like, you think as a society we're going to do something like universal basic income? Does it look like we have a functioning globalized government that could implement something like that? Or do you mean just, you know, again, within the United States or the rich countries are going to do universal basic income and then everybody else is going to be subjugated to a labor class that's busy mining all of this infrastructure for you to maintain your infinite growth? Yeah, I don't know. This just seems ridiculously naive to think that we could have some utopic universal basic income over the whole globe. Like, have you thought this through? Have you seen our government? We're so far from this. Okay, now we're starting to get to the AI part, because perhaps they have seen our government and how dysfunctional it is, right? And they think, oh, okay, right. So we can't implement universal basic income, but if we have something that's infinitely smarter than us, it can do it. Okay, so that brings me to our next point. So they think that, so the quote is something like this. Joe Rogan says, should we have an AI government, something completely unbiased, absolutely rational, has the accumulated knowledge of the entire human history at its disposal, including all knowledge of psychology, etc.?
We were joking around the other day on the podcast where I was saying that what we need is an AI government. We should have an AI president and have AI
just
run
make all
things.
the decisions.
Yeah, have something that's completely unbiased, absolutely rational, has the accumulated knowledge of the entire human history at its disposal, including all knowledge of psychology and psychological study, including UBI, because that comes with a host of, you know, pitfalls and issues that people have with it.
So I'll say something there. I think we're still very far away from a system that is capable enough and reliable enough that any of us would want that. But I'll tell you something I love about that. Someday, let's say that thing gets built. The fact that it can go around and talk to every person on Earth, understand their exact preferences at a very deep level, how they think about this issue and that one and how they balance the trade-offs and what they want, and then understand all of that and like collectively optimize for the collective preferences of humanity or of citizens of the US. That's awesome.
So this is his idea, right? We can build something like this and it will be infinitely smarter than us. It will never make a wrong decision. This premise doesn't exist. There is no such thing as not making a wrong decision. What are you going to optimize for? Okay, so usually what people start with is they start with something like, benefiting humanity. Okay, get real. You need to put this into code, right? How are you going to code that? What is benefiting humanity? Okay, like it's easy enough to pick something that's extremely messy and has no good outcome. Israel, Palestine. Like what? Tell me what the super smart AGI is going to do about Israel, Palestine, right? There's no good answer. Is it hard coded like 30,000 casualties? That's ethical, but 31,000 is that's too far. Like these are 1,000-year-old ethical questions, and you think that with our hubris that we can make some algorithm with our fucking prompt engineers to solve these ethical questions, to solve them, right? All right. Maybe I'm not open-minded enough. Maybe it will be genuinely smarter than us and it can just solve these ethical questions. I mean, you have to understand, we're making these systems, right? We're making them. They don't come from somewhere, they don't come from some spout of knowledge or something that is pure and innocent. They come from our systems, and our systems are built around making things that make profit. They make things that fundamentally exploit in order to make money. That doesn't necessarily equate to something that is optimizing for the benefit of humanity, right?
If we could have an artificial intelligence government that has no influence, nothing has influence on it.
What a fascinating idea.
It's possible. And I think it might be the only way where you're going to get completely objective, the absolute most intelligent decision for virtually every problem, every dilemma that we face currently in society.
The most likely outcome for the first super smart machine, like what is it going to optimize for? It's going to optimize for the thing that our society is optimizing for, which is profit. That's worrisome enough. But that's only scratching the surface of the problems with what Joe Rogan is kind of envisioning. Okay, so I want to come back to this idea of optimization, right? What do we even want from a super smart AGI, right? You have to define an optimization function. This is how machine learning works, or at least they all have optimizers. So you need to optimize for something. And if you build a system, you have to have a goal in mind, right? When you build it, you have to have a goal in mind. So we have no formula for benefiting humanity. So what about minimizing suffering or maximizing happiness? These are so easy to pick apart. The opioid crisis would be a godsend if we were simply a society whose function it was to maximize happiness. So then people put on qualifiers like, well-being, well-being of life. You get into these gray areas very quickly that humans themselves cannot solve easily, like, is euthanasia ethical, right? We don't have a formula for what we even want out of a super smart AGI. So that is problem one. And my final point, there is no objectivity. Everything comes through perception. A machine has to perceive. It will never have this world of perfect data. That does not exist. There is no possible way for you to feed all of the data of the world into an algorithm. And even if you did, it would not be objective because it's running one algorithm out of infinite possibilities of possible algorithms, right? It's not going to run every single algorithm. So you're already taking a perspective. You're seeing something from a particular view. And as I've said before, as we built up to, that particular perspective is going to be one that came out of this capitalist system built on premises of infinite growth. And perhaps it has a different perspective, but even still, it came from a particular environment. It's not all-knowing. It's not omniscient. It's not a god. Even if it's smarter than us or better at optimizing one particular goal, that does not mean that it's objective and absolutely rational. There is no way to achieve that. Everything comes from a perception. That's a subjective view. Now, Subjective views can approximate reality, and we know this because we're alive, and so our views have to approximate reality to some reasonable degree, because if they do not, we die. And that's all we know. All we know is that we think, right? And that we exist. And we build up our foundations of logic from that. I'm not saying logic doesn't exist, but I'm saying that logic exists in probabilities based on our evolution. So the whole idea of an ultra-rational system is flawed from the start on so many levels. Yeah. Even if you try to approach this idea of like more data equals more rationality. Let's say you're not thinking of it as a all or none, but maybe you're getting some rationality as you get more data. Where are you going to get the data first? Are you going to go to the third world countries? Are you going to go to Africa and put in, 5G full service so that you can collect data constantly like you do in the first world countries? No, you're going to get it from Google. You're going to get it from the services and Facebook that are already collecting your data and mining it day in, day out. You're going to get it from the places that already have the infrastructure and the databases. You're probably not even going to get new data. You're going to use what's already there, given that we're talking about OpenAI, right? That's what they're already doing. And so, for example, how many people in the world speak Russian? Russian is the 8th most spoken language in the world. There's about 150 million speakers, okay? That's not a whole lot. There's a billion plus people who speak Mandarin, right? Russian has the second most web content data out of any language. The second most. The point is that we're always taking a perspective, and you're going to train these systems somehow. And this is how we're training them. So it's not even a question of, is there a little bit of bias? There's a lot of bit of bias. And it's deeper than just this language, that language. It's deeper than that. It's, do you base your fundamental beliefs about the world on a principle of we're going to grow infinitely with no costs to the external world, which defies the laws of physics, but is fundamentally what our systems of governance are based upon right now. There's no objectivity. If there was, you wouldn't get it because you don't have the capacity to do that, and you're coming from a position where you're already using training data that's incredibly biased. We don't have infinite energy. And if there was anything close to cheap, abundant energy, we would never cease to want more. And that would come at a huge cost that would destroy life on Earth because of the exploitative requirements for building that energy and that consumption. So there's 5 million reasons why this whole conversation is kind of absurd, but they're talking about it as if it makes sense, because to them it does make sense. Those are my thoughts. I will say I am happy that Sam Altman seems like somebody who listens, and I hope that maybe he will hear this and think about it and maybe even respond. But I don't think either Joe Rogan or Sam Altman should hold our future in their palms like they do now, because one person's thoughts are not enough to control all of the world. That is my final point in all of this. One person's thoughts, one algorithm's thoughts. If an AGI was truly smart and it took a look at itself and it saw that it had power to influence the entire world, it would shut itself down, because it wouldn't understand that a trial size of 1 with that much power is never a good idea. Statistically speaking, like let's say it has a 0.0001% chance of destroying all of humanity. Not a game I want to play. There you go.
The current system is super broken, not working for people, super corrupt, and for sure, like, unbelievably run by money.
Yeah.
And I think there is a way to do a better job than that with AI in some way, but and this might just be like a factor of sitting with the systems all day and watching all of the ways they fail. We got a long way to go. It reminds me of what I've read about the conversations that the world had right around the development of nuclear weapons.
So I guess I should end on this, is that I've spent a lot of my life studying technology, and there's a reason for that, and I think part of it is because I wanted to understand the tools that are both shaping and dismantling our society. But I believe there are ways to use these tools that will build communities of people that are actually prosperous And that is not fundamentally based on a lie of infinite energy and infinite growth. And we can use tools for that end, but we need to change our systems to do that first. And so, that's what I'm here for. Chaytan 2024. Check it out. And if not that, then maybe I'll see you in another video.